Okay, so hey guys, and welcome back to another predictions video, and in today's video I'm going to be predicting the Lomachenko versus Kambosos Jr. fight. If you are new around here though, and you haven't yet subscribed, please do so. Like video if you're doing the like video, and let's get straight into it. So, going into this fight, Kambosos Jr. is 21-2 with 10 KOs, and Lomachenko is 17-3 with 11 KOs. This fight is for the vacant IBF and IBO World Lightweight titles. Kambosos Jr.'s last fight was a win via majority decision versus Hughes, and Lomachenko's last fight was a loss via unanimous decision versus Haney. This is in Kambosos Jr.'s home country of Australia. Lomachenko is 36 and Kambosos Jr. is 30, and Lomachenko is a southpaw. Lomachenko's losses have come versus Haney in 2023, Lopez in 2020, and Salido in 2014, and Kambosos Jr.'s losses have come versus Haney in 2022 and also in 2022, twice in 2022. And to speak a bit more about what I've just been saying, like I say, this has the vacant IBF title on the line. It's a belt in which, of course, Haney was holding before when he was undisputed, and of course now he's moved up a little while ago now, but it's just not been contested for, I believe, since then. And now, as of recent, we've had a lot more variation in lightweight champions since, of course, Haney moving up, and it's good to see. It's nice to see, and I think this fight definitely is deserving of that of a world title. And when you look at both of their last performances, Kambosos Jr.'s last win was a very controversial win. It was one which everybody's going to call robbery on and everything, and it's the same as the one with Lomachenko and Haney, just the opposite way around. Everybody thought Haney didn't deserve to win, and Lomachenko thought that deserved to win, and so they're both coming off interesting decisions. They both were close fights, and the Hughes one, probably arguably you could state a case for it being a Hughes win, and in that case be quite a valid case. But of course, home judges. Obviously, it was in America, but Kambosos Jr. was the clear favourite, so home judges in that aspect. And same with Haney Loma. Really, the home judges would have been towards Haney, and it's unfortunate to see that that sometimes is the case, but it is boxing at this point, and we kind of are getting used to it, even though it is annoying and it is frustrating. And I think it probably is going to motivate both of them going into this fight to really want to put on a decisive victory. When you look at Kambosos Jr.'s last few fights, I mean, the Hughes one, obviously, it was very controversial. Then he had two losses beforehand versus Kambosos versus Haney, and then he had the Lopez win, which was a big win for him and probably the biggest of his career. Well, definitely the biggest of his career, but was also a close fight as well. And then you go to two fights before that; they were both split decisions as well. So he's not really ever been winning convincingly or really convincingly, and possibly that's down to a few attacking elements in which possibly he lacks, and the power, obviously, you would have to argue is one of them. He's not ever really been a crazy power puncher or anything, but possibly it's the way that he actually phrases and sets up his attacks that perhaps aren't too impressive, and possibly he rushes in a little bit too much, or he is a bit too much on the back foot. I'm not too sure, but there's arguments as to show that Kambosos Jr. is struggling to maybe take that step up to the world level and be able to win convincingly against anybody at the world level, let alone Lomachenko. And of course, Lomachenko, he's obviously coming off the defeat, and it could have affected him. And there are elements in which you have to look upon, like his age and the fact he is also going to Kambosos Jr.'s home country, where you could argue where things could go wrong for him. And obviously, he's dealt with setbacks and dealt with close decisions, and the Lopez one was quite a close decision as well for him, but he's always been able to come back and win from then and be able to, go back to a world level, fighting for world championships relatively quickly after any of the defeats he has had. And so that's, as a fighter, Lomachenko, he's proven that he is world class level time and time again, and he is an amazing fighter. And when you look at some of the names he's fought and been able to beat, it's very impressive. And just the actual style, in which I'm going to talk about in a moment, that he actually fights with is just really impressive. And he is just that sweet science of boxing, which personally for myself I really enjoy watching, and that's why he is one of my favourite fighters around at the moment. And even if this fight is too much for him age-wise, and he doesn't really look as anywhere near the old Lomachenko, he's still built a legacy which is very, very impressive, and is a world-class level fighter, even if this is possibly his last fight, because there are talks about possibly this being his last fight. Loma has hinted at it a little bit in this fight if he does lose, and if he does lose in bad fashion. Also on this card though is Hughes versus Johnson for the WBA World Bantamweight title, which I think Hughes will win via unanimous decision. She obviously beat Healy in that last fight, but I like what she's doing with the fact that she is really going and chasing big fights, and I have a lot of respect for that. It seems like big fights weren't just kind of naturally coming her way. She joined Matchroom to seemingly get big fights with the likes of Ebony Bridges, and that just didn't really ever seem to come to anything because of Bridges' injury and her losing the belt and everything. And before that, when she actually won the title, Hughes, she won it out in Dubai on a smaller show, and so I have a lot of respect for her really wanting to go and chase these big fights, like I mentioned, and this is huge for women's boxing. It's a very big fight, and Johnson, obviously, she has fought at a top level and lost against Scotney at a top level, and obviously that was a bit of a different fight in which I think the Hughes fight is, or I think Scotney possibly is more skilled technically than her, but Hughes has a lot of will and a lot of desire and will put it on Johnson and would be consistently attacking, and to be fair does have decent head movement at the same time as well. And it was a pleasure to speak to Hughes on the channel a little while ago, but I believe that Hughes will win via unanimous decision. I think if she can get past the jab of Johnson's, which is good, and was seemingly something in which she was utilising well against Scotney and in her prior fights as well. If she can get past that, which I think Hughes can, because she is good at getting in range and finding gaps and being able to just overload when she is in range, I think if she can do that, she can get a unanimous decision victory. But I don't think it will be an easy fight. I don't think any of these fights are going to be on this card, which I'm going to talk about, including the main event, this fight, and the Maloney fight, which I'm going to talk about in a moment, are going to be clear fights. I think they are going to have elements in which they could go both ways, and they are going to have parts in which we could see a shock defeat or anything like that. But to speak about the Maloney Guevara fight for, of course, the WBC interim super flyweight title, Guevara, of course, fought Quadras for this title back at the end of last year, and he lost. And I believe Quadras has just vacated it. I'm not too sure as to why. Obviously, he is getting on a bit now, so maybe it was an injury or something I just wasn't clued up upon. And obviously, Guevara's now got this opportunity. I think that Guevara is going to win. I think he's going to stop him in round 11, TKO in round 11. That would be that's quite a big statement for me to make. But Maloney, he has gone away and won since his devastating defeat versus Nakatani, devastating knockout. But I just think that if he's going to get caught with shots, it could have weakened him, and I think it probably will have weakened him. And Guevara is somebody who is going to match Maloney's in-your-face type style, and he does carry power in his shots. It's not anything the level of Nakatani's, but there is power there, and I just think he could outwork him. And Maloney is a tough fighter, but I just think if he's going to be consistently in your face taking shots, I just don't necessarily know if he'd be able to take it. Maybe not to the same level that he used to. I'm not too sure, but I'm going to go with, like I say, a late stoppage victory for Guevara and a big statement to make on a big stage for Guevara, who's, fought top level guys like Taraji and like Quadras, but he's never actually fought on a big stage or anything. So it's about time that he's had that. And I mean, both fighters have struggled with steps up that they've had in their careers. But I think this is the time for Guevara to become interim world champion. And I mean, it's not really the best of weeks for the Maloney brothers, then, really, is it? Because obviously, Andrew Maloney lost at the start of the week on the Inoue undercard, and I do think Jason Maloney is going to lose this one as well. But to go back to the main event, Kambosos Jr., speak about him as a fighter, he is fast in his movements, and I would say arguably faster. He's the younger, faster guy than that of Lomachenko. He moves well. He's got a controlled jab, which he does like to relatively consistently throw out. He does good body work, and he was utilising that a little bit. I think Haney utilised his body work probably the best against Lomachenko, and that was slowing him down at times, and that was the thing that he was having the most success with, Haney. And so if Kambosos Jr. can utilise that body work, then I think we could see possibly Lomachenko struggle to get in range at times. He counters with combinations, Kambosos Jr. He's got good boxing fundamentals. He can gain a flow, he can gain a rhythm, and when he does, he's hard to get out of that flow and that rhythm. He's eager. I think he's definitely eager, like I say, since the since the win in his last time being such controversial, and also in front of his home crowd again, he's definitely going to be eager to put on a show. He feints well, he's well conditioned, he can go to 12 round distance, and he has been, of course, relatively consistently and still been able to fight like perfectly fine going into the later rounds. He's got a good chin. I mean, Hughes is definitely not known for power punches, neither is Haney, but that he did take some big shots against both of them, and he did continue to keep wanting to fight and keep coming forwards. He counters well. He's got relatively good timing. I mean, he caught Lopez with a very good time shot when they fought, and that was probably one of the first times that we've seen Kambosos Jr. actually hurt somebody. Well, one of the only times we've seen him hurt somebody at a top level, and so he has got a good timing. Like I say, counters well, and he can fight probably best off the back foot. I think a lot of the problem he was having in that fight versus Hughes was that he was trying to fight on the front foot because Hughes was wanting to fight on the back foot and then counter, and he just struggled, I think, being able to actually impose himself on the front foot and actually be able to do any work, because when he did just lunge in and jump in, and it wasn't really that clean or anything. And so I think he is a better fighter on the back foot, and I think Lomachenko might put him on the back foot, and Kambosos Jr. could possibly be willing to go onto the back foot. Speak negatives about him, I think his chin can be quite often in the air, and he does duck his head down a bit at times. I think sometimes he can get too comfortable in rounds, and I think Hughes was utilising his quite explosive counters when Kambosos Jr. was being a bit lazy and a bit too comfortable. He can be outworked. I think he could possibly, I think he's eager to prove, but I believe he might be a little bit lacking in determination at times to really push the pace and really go for a fight. He's got a low guard. He can rush in when he does want to attack, but it's not really like a rushing in an aggressive attack. It's like a rushing in because he has to, because otherwise he's not actually throwing anything in that round. He can cross his feet. I think he likes fighting at a slower pace, and Lomachenko can control the pace and fight at his pace very well. He, I think, struggles against southpaws and actually being able to get past their front foot. Against Hughes, he seems to struggle with it, and Lomachenko is probably one of the best southpaws around. He might struggle with that. I think the actual defence, he hasn't really got too much of a defence. He does, lack momentum, of course. Like I say, only been winning decisions, and or losing, he's been winning close decisions. Cutting off the ring, I think he really struggled to cut off the ring against Hughes, and if he would have done that, then he would have had a lot more success than what he did, and he was just letting Hughes really just circle around on the back foot. Speaking about Lomachenko as a fighter, he finds angles amazingly. That's something in which, when you look at, not to say that Lomachenko is up there with the best pound for pound currently, but when you look at pound for pound greats at the moment, especially, the angles that they find, when you speak about Terence Crawford, the angles that he finds and the way he works them angles is just so impressive, and Lomachenko is the master at finding great angles and just finding shots in which you just don't expect, and just the fact that he can double up on the jab and just seem to not even have just touched you twice. It can look like he's just hit you once, but he's just hit you twice, and it's just them type of angles and them types of ways that he pivots around as well, and it's just so impressive the way that he can work around you and find his angles, of course, just showing how high of an IQ he does have. He's well conditioned. I think it was interesting to see that he didn't really go for the final round against Haney. I don't necessarily know why he didn't really push that final round. He possibly could have nicked the scorecards if he would have done that, but he didn't really seem to, so I still think he is well conditioned. It's just I'm not too sure what happened in that final round. His punch variation is excellent. He can find a way to fight any way necessary, really. Like, there's not really many styles in which he's not used to and which he can't fight in. He's tricky to pin down. He's got a nice high guard. Mixes up his attacks very well, can fight at mid-range or in close on the front foot or the back foot. He's very controlled in his pressure, and he can be in front of you but still can be quite hard to hit, and like I say, find them angles even though he is right in front of you. He counters well, pivots well, range control is excellent as well. That's something in which somebody like a Niue gets talked about for just having great range control, and I think Lomachenko has very good range control, and a lot of the time he does improve throughout fights. There's always talks about him being able to calculate fights, and in the early rounds really just methodically thinking about what type of a fighter he's in against with and how he's going to deal with that, and then he adjusts and improves throughout the fight a lot of the time. Negatives about him, I think he possibly is slowing down a little bit at times. So that possibly could be his age or anything. I don't necessarily know if he is past his peak, but this fight is definitely going to prove that. It's a huge fight for both fighters, really. He needs to be making sure that he keep his balance. He has amazing pivots and stuff like that. It's just sometimes I think his footwork, if he does get countered with a shot, then his balance can be a little bit off if he gets caught off guard. His head can be on the line at times. Sometimes his head movement's excellent. Sometimes his head can be on the line if he's not really thinking about adjusting his head too much. He needs to cover the body, I think, a little bit better. He has a nice high tight guard, but that body is definitely there to be hit. And like I say, Haney, that was where he was having the best of his success against him. He can cross his feet a bit at times when he is trying to close the distance. He's not overly physical, so it'd be, I don't really think Kambosos is, so I don't really think he's got to worry too much about that. But I don't think, like I say, he's overly physical. He can be timed and he can be countered. He is unorthodox in his movements, but he can be hit and be countered. And with the speed that Kambosos Jr. has, I'm sure he could do that at times. And he's a slower starter. Like I say, he's thinking a lot of the start and really trying to calculate you, but he is a bit of a slower starter some of the time, and so Kambosos Jr. possibly could put him on it straight away. I don't necessarily know if he will or not, and he has been quite inactive in the same time as well, and age and inactivity are two things which definitely don't work well together, and he fought twice in 2021, once in 2022, once in 2023, and now he's fighting, so it's definitely not been as consistent and as regular as I'm sure he would really have wanted, but nonetheless, he's back fighting in this huge fight now. Lomachenko is the favourite for this fight, and I think that Lomachenko will win via TKO in round 10. I believe he's going to be able to stop Kambosos Jr. I think it's going to be a very big statement to make at 36 years of age. I think he's going to be able to show a level of class above Kambosos Jr. and really be able to work him and outwork him and break him mentally. And I just don't think Kambosos Jr. is going to be ready for the level in which Lomachenko is, and the variety in his attacks, the angles, I think it is just going to be too much for him in the end. And like I say, he could, in my opinion, I don't know if it's going to be like a devastating knockout or anything like that, but it wouldn't surprise me if it's like a corner stoppage or something like that, just because Kambosos Jr. is getting beaten up and is getting outboxed completely. And like I say, that's a huge statement to make at 36 years of age. And when you look around the lightweight division about possible fights that could be next for somebody like a Lomachenko if he does win this fight, you look at the big names, you look at a Zepeda, you look at a Martin, you look at a Davis, you look at a Stevenson, of course, who's fighting Harutian, and you look at them big names, I don't necessarily know, and Muratala as well, I don't necessarily know who would be able to beat, who Lomachenko would be able to beat right now, but I'm intrigued for all of them to go up against him, so I wouldn't mind seeing a Zepeda, I wouldn't mind seeing a Stevenson, I wouldn't mind seeing a Davis, a Martin, a Muratala, any of them really, to be completely honest. Why not put him in? Lomachenko seems to only ever really want the biggest fights and to only really take the biggest fight. He's never seemingly ducked anybody, and so why not put him in with any of the big names? I think the lightweight division, obviously there's quite a few fighters that have left as of recent, but I still think it is a great division and there's great fights to be made, and Lomachenko is still around the world class level punch, I believe. But yeah, that's it for today's video. Hope you did enjoy. Like the video if you didn't, do like the video, subscribe if you're new, and thanks for watching.